Well, I'll just wait on Becky to sit down, then we'll go. Anybody have a couch I can sleep on tonight? Good morning. Joe does. Yeah, my old buddy's going to come in. There you go. Have my back. All right, guys. So if you have forgotten what we've been doing, or maybe you've just slept since last week, or maybe you slept through some former sermons that we've been through. But we've been going through the Old Testament. And it's because the Old Testament is what the New Testament is based on. The whole Bible is about the coming Redeemer or Messiah, the present Redeemer or Messiah, or the returning Redeemer and Messiah. So we have this thing going around in churches nowadays, and they say, well, maybe we don't need the Old Testament as much. There are people that even say, well, we just need the letters of Paul because we're the New Testament church. But what we're showing you here is that you need the whole Bible. We've been through some of the minor prophets and even talked about how those books that a lot of us don't even know are in the Bible or we've never heard a sermon out of, that Jesus is in there. And so now we're coming to, guys, like we're going to be splitting this up kind of in chronological order. So we're going to be in Daniel one week and Ezekiel in one week and in Lamentations the next week and back in Daniel and Ezekiel. So we're going to jump around a little bit. So watch the Facebook page and I will tell you where to start reading to do your homework. But this week we're in Daniel. We're going to start off in the first couple of chapters in Daniel, and specifically in Daniel chapter 2, starting in verse 31. But to get you caught up with that, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson, and then a little bit, and there's going to be some history mixed in there. And so ladies, you'll have to endure that. Guys will probably get into it more. And then we'll get into some preaching, all right? So what's happening, if you start reading the book of Daniel, we've been told in the scriptures that judgment is coming on Israel. It starts way back in Deuteronomy. God says, if you follow my laws, then I will make your stay in the land long and prosperous. But if you turn away and worship other gods, I will send you into captivity. And that's what we're beginning to see. So in 722 BC, the northern kingdom of Israel, after they split in the civil war, the northern kingdom of Israel was destroyed by the Assyrians. And nowadays we would call those people the Samaritans. If you read the New Testament, you'll hear about them, the Samaritans. It's a conglomeration of people that were part Israelite, and they had heritage in the Israelites and also in the Assyrian Empire background. But in 586, Jeremiah had prophesied that the end was coming for Judah, and it does. And it comes at the hands of the Babylonians. And the Babylonians come in, and they have three waves of deportations. The first one, Daniel is going to be taken out. When they have the first deportation, it will be the royal family, a lot of people out of the royal family, the rich, the people that have the most to offer to the Babylonian Empire. They will say, who are the most educated people? Who are the people that are the most well-to-do that will actually add something to us? We will take them captive and we will make them part of our empire. And Daniel goes in that first wave. The second wave, you'll see Ezekiel go. They'll bring a lot of the priests. They'll bring a lot of the religious people. They will try to destroy their religious system or any authority that is not theirs. They'll take them out. Ezekiel will come in that wave. And then the third wave is the most destructive. It is the one that happens in 586 BC. The temple is destroyed. The walls are torn down. King Jehoiakim, he is the last one that is there, and he's the one that burned the scroll of Jeremiah. And he will see destruction. And things get bad. The Jewish people who live by dietary laws, they end up in cannibalism, is how bad it gets. So it goes from bad to worse to worse to worse. But Daniel is in this first wave. The utter destruction has not happened yet. And Daniel is a young man. A lot of scholars think he was somewhere between 12 and 15 when he was brought out of the land. And now, Daniel is someone who his whole life, has been prepared for royal service. He's been educated. He's been taught the religious law. He's been taught the public law. He's been taught all of the ways of governing. He's probably been prepared for a life of public service, and all of a sudden now he's being brought into another land. And when he gets there, it says he's placed under the master of the eunuchs. And so that means, delicately, that Daniel is not the man he used to be, okay? And Daniel is brought into a place where they want to change his name. They want to change his customs, his hopes of having a family. And if you were a Jewish person at this time, it is all built around the land and your family and your descendants. And all of these things have been taken away from Daniel. If you read the Bible, we don't think much about, well, they changed his name. But every name in the Bible means something if you're Jewish, and it's all listed in these genealogies. And so when you think everything about Daniel's future has been changed and taken away. But you know what Daniel does? He stands fast in his faith. He serves God. When it's hard, when it doesn't go by his plan, when everything surrounding him in his life, to the very core foundation of who he is, has been destroyed. Daniel does not give in. He doesn't eat the things that are not legal for him to eat. He doesn't live the way that's illegal for him to live according to God. Daniel stands fast in his faith. And we talk about how hard it is to live as a Christian today, right? I mean, really. We talk about how hard it is, and it is hard to live in a society that's against you. But Daniel's in a foreign land. There is no going home. Most of our circumstances are circumstantial. They're repairable. They're temporary. Daniel's changes are permanent. And his faith in God stays the same. As a matter of fact, if Daniel doesn't undergo these hardships, nobody would ever know his name. He'd just be some other royal kid that grew up somewhere. Probably wouldn't have had that. He may have influenced a few people around him to live a godly life. But because he's in Babylon, because Daniel is in Babylon, we're reading a book named after him today. And his service to God and the service of his friends that he helped inspire. So when you start having hardship, don't say, God, it's just getting too hard for me here. God, it's a little too rough for me. You see, that's where God flourishes. When we think that when we have all of our securities and all of our things that we lean on taken away from us and all we have to lean on is God, that's when God flourishes in your life. So by the time that Ezekiel is deported in the second deportation, you'll read his book, I hope you do, because we're going to go through it. But Ezekiel 3 times lists Daniel is a wise man on the level of Noah and Job. He's well known for his wisdom. And so there comes a point in time where Daniel is sought as an advisor by the king of Babylon, by the person who took him into captivity. He has now become such an asset as a wise and godly man that now the pagan kings are starting to ask him as a wise man, as the head wise man of the nation, for advice. Now, there are a lot of smart people in this world, a lot of people much smarter than me, but wise men are hard to come by. There's a story of an airplane that was going down. There were 4 people on the airplane. There was the pilot, there was an old pastor, there was a teenage boy, and there was a world-renowned brain surgeon. And so the pilot comes to them and he says, the plane's going down. There's 5 of us and there's only there's 4 of us, there's only 3 parachutes. And he grabs a parachute and he jumps out. And so then the brain surgeon goes, I am a world-renowned brain surgeon. People all over are depending on my research to save their lives. And he grabs a chute and jumps out. And so the old pastor looks at the young man and he says, son, I've lived a good life. I know where I'm going. Go ahead and take that last parachute. And he said, Pastor, there's still 2 parachutes left. And he said, no, there were only 3 and 2 people already jumped out. And he said, no, Pastor, the world's smartest man just grabbed my backpack and jumped out of the airplane. But Daniel is a man. Daniel is a man who is sought after for his godly wisdom because he turns his attention in his life towards the Lord. And in 603 BC, in the 2nd year of King Nebuchadnezzar, he's the one who destroyed Jerusalem. In the 2nd year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, the Bible tells us. And he is terrified by this dream. Have you ever had a dream and you kind of wake up in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep, you're in a cold sweat, and it's like, it ain't right. And maybe every time you close your eyes, you see this, whatever it was, and you're even afraid to like get up and go to the bathroom because something's going to jump out at you afterwards. That's what's happened. The king in his royal palace has had a dream so disturbing, so lifelike and real that he is terrified by it. And he said, I need an interpretation of this, and I need a real interpretation. And I know that these wise men, sometimes they blow a lot of smoke up at me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that these really are the wise men and that I get a true interpretation because I'm not going to tell them what I dreamed. They're going to tell me. How do you think that worked out for them? Not too good. None of them can tell anybody their dreams. Nobody. I can't walk up to Becky and say, you dreamed this last night. I don't know. I may be able to tell that she's had a dream simply because she's taken all the covers and woken me up in the middle of the night. But I don't know what she's dreamt. He gives them an impossible mission. And as a result, he said, all you guys are false prophets. All you idol worshipers, none of you really have an idea of what's going on. But Daniel. Daniel says, give me a day. Give me a few days. Let me seek the Lord. God will reveal it to me. I don't know this, and man can't know this, but God knows everything. You great king sitting on your throne, the one who has generals reporting to him knowledge from all over your empire and bringing the smartest people from all of your conquered peoples. There is no one that knows this except the Lord our God. And so Daniel reports back to him. And he says, Your Majesty, in chapter 2, verse 31. He says, Your Majesty, as you were watching, suddenly a colossal statue appeared. And that statue, tall and dazzling, was standing in front of you. And its appearance was terrifying. The head of the statue was pure gold. Its chest and its arms were silver. Its stomach and its thighs were bronze. And its legs were iron. And its feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. And as you were watching, a stone broke off without a hand touching it, struck the statue on its feet of iron and fired clay, and crushed them. Then the iron and fired clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were shattered and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, and not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. Pretty impressive, right? Pretty impressive. And the king at this point in time is going, all right. Number one, when he quit shaking probably, he thought, this is a guy who is in touch with someone with some power greater than everything else in the earth. greater than all of the wise men of my land, than my military advisors, than my own royal wisdom. And you have to remember, Babylon had a huge library. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Anything you wanted to know, you could go to the Babylonian library. Massive. I think the next largest one would be centuries later in Alexandria. But nothing rivaled it. Yet there's a little guy from Israel, from a land that's been conquered by military might, that knows better. And here's the interpretation. He said, Your Majesty, you are the King of kings, and the God of heavens has given you sovereignty, power, strength, and glory. Pretty good gifts, right? He has given him the ability to rule. Now, if you don't know Nebuchadnezzar, that'd be hard for him to swallow. Because Nebuchadnezzar is somebody who went down and defeated all of the allies of Judah, defeated the Egyptian empire, defeated Assyrians. He's a guy who's fought all kinds of wars. You see, he was simply a general for years before he became emperor. His father, Nabopolassar, laugh at me and you try to pronounce it. He died while Nebuchadnezzar was off fighting wars. He didn't even know he was king for a little while. He just knew that he was a great military general and thought through his own military strength that he was subjugating these peoples. But God said, no, I am the one that gave you sovereignty, the ability to rule and command, power and strength, the ability to enforce those commands, and glory, because all glory is God's. And he says, wherever people live, or wild animals, or birds of the sky, he has handed them over to you and made you ruler over all of them. You are the head of gold. And at this time, his head of gold went and kind of got hard to hold up. He's liking this. Wouldn't you? If somebody said, you're the greatest of your generation. As a matter of fact, you're the greatest, he's going to find out, of several generations, of several empires. He's going to like that. There's some things he's not going to like. But now his attention is piqued. And you see, he rules for 43 years. And what we're going to see is that we start off with this head of gold and silver and bronze and iron, and it constantly gets a little less and a little less and a little less. Now, these materials, while their value is less, their strength is more. So each one is going to be a little stronger militarily, but not as much. None of these have the sovereignty and the power given to them to rule as the king like Nebuchadnezzar has. So the king or the emperor of everyone becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. So keep that in mind. And he says, after you, there will arise another kingdom inferior to yours. Now, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, there are a series of rulers that rule on after he passes away, and it exists till 539 BC. You can see Daniel chapter 5 for the fall of Babylon, the narrative of the fall of Babylon to the Medo-Persian Empire, which is coming next. And when they fall, remember the numbers go backwards. In 539, Darius the Mede and Cyrus the Great take over, the Medo-Persian Empire. And there are two forces. They ruled in territory that is in Iran today. And they were a conglomeration. They came together. They take it over. But the Persians are greater. You can read other prophecies in Daniel and see it describes that one side is greater than the other. But this is an empire that lasts 208 years, till 231 BC. And you can read more about them in Daniel chapters 7, 8, and 10. But they're silver. They're great. Hence Cyrus the Great, right? You can also read about Cyrus over in Isaiah. because God named him a couple of hundred years before he was born. That's an interesting story we won't get into today. But then he says, and there was a third kingdom of bronze, which will rule the whole earth. And that is the Greek Empire. They ruled from 331 BC to 146. And the Greek Empire is Alexander the Great's empire. Another great. These emperors, they really like that term, right? But this is a huge empire. This is an empire that when we see it come together, it rules the whole earth, the whole known earth at the time, and it spreads like wildfire. It's one that moves so swiftly. It's why it encapsulates the thighs, because it is on the move. Alexander, by the age of 22, had already defeated the Persians and was on his way all the way to India. Now, he dies at a very young age, no heir to his throne. He gets split up. His kingdom gets split up into 4 different sectors. And 2 of them that you will want to remember, the Egyptians, which are ruled by the Ptolemies, and the Syrian area, which is ruled by the Seleucids. And you'll see them later on too in Daniel chapter 11. You start reading Daniel chapter 11, you start hearing about these 2 regions that are warring back and forth. And they're in there, and their wars are described because they're on each side of Israel. And guess who's caught in the middle? Israel. And then we have the legs of the iron and the feet of the clay. It says, and the 4th kingdom will be as strong as iron, for iron crushes and shatters everything. And like iron that smashes, it will crush and smash all others. So you have the Roman Empire. And by 146 BC, they had vanished their rivals in Carthage, the northern Africa, and also defeated the Greek alliance in the Battle of Corinth. And they are called, get this, the Eternal Kingdom. They call themselves the Eternal Kingdom. They think that they are an empire that will last forever. And up until this point in time in our history, they are the longest reigning empire that has ever been. They do split in 395 AD. You get that? They were founded in 146. In 395 AD, they split into 2 because the empire got so big they couldn't rule it all from Rome. So they say, well, we're going to have 2 capitals. We'll put one over in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul in Turkey, and we'll rule it from 2 halves. It's so large. We are the glorious eternal empire. Now, in God's perspective, they're just iron. Iron's tough. It can defeat a lot of things, but it's not that glorious. It lasts a long time, but it's not permanent. You see, all of these empires, are you starting to understand that all of these empires, while they may be impressive to start, or they may have a very strong military background, every one of them either depends on their riches, or they depend on their military strength, or they depend on something based on their humanity. Something based on me. Something based on what my life looks like, based on my own capabilities. And if these huge empires, if the eternal empire of Rome, if it is not meant to last forever in God's eyes, and it's not even as glorious as the first empire that's going on, what do you think that your plans that you base on all the worldly goods and timetables look like to God? Empires that last hundreds of years and span generations. And they come to an end because all their sovereignty, all of their power, and all of their might come from God. Guys, I know that it's hard in the middle of life, especially when things are going good. We all talk about, trying to trust in God when things are going good, but I actually think that it's harder to trust in God sometimes when things are going really good than really bad. I mean, when you hit rock bottom, it's kind of easy sometimes to turn to God, right? But when things are really good, and you've got the new car and you've got the new house, you've got the cool vacations going on, that's when it's hard to trust God. That's when it's hard to look at his timetable and say, God, I know that the only thing eternal in all of this is based on your will and your sovereignty and your blessing and your love for me. And even if these things go away, God, you're going to continue. Your will continue in my life when all these things are gone. And that's where Daniel's at. All the things are gone. And when it comes time to serve God, he's serving them. And the prophecy ends up, says, you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's fired clay and partly of iron, and it will be a divided kingdom. Though some of the strength of the iron will be in it, you saw the iron mixed with clay, and that the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. Part of the kingdom will be strong and part will be brittle. And you saw the iron mixed with the clay. The peoples will mix with one another but not hold together, just as iron does not mix with fired clay. Now, a lot of theologians say this will be a Roman Empire reborn. It will be a confederation of armies, a picture of worldly kingdoms that try to evoke their power higher than God. And get the picture. Now, don't go home and tell all of your friends, my preacher said that. I'm just giving you a word picture here, okay? Because I don't know either. I can speculate. But think of it like this. Think if you had nations coming together in a confederation, and it was, say, Russia. Now, the Russians don't have much in common with the Chinese, do they? Not really. And neither one of them have much in common with Iran. And I'm just using them because they're common world powers right now that are kind of joined together. None of them are very much alike. They don't share the same values. They don't share the same history. They don't share anything really. They're different government systems. One is a theocracy, so-called. One is there are two different forms of communism involved or socialism involved that aren't really as close as we think they are. But they are all joined together in one power. And what we get a picture here of is world powers, no matter who they are, and don't spend the rest of the week worrying about who these 10 toes are, okay? I had a professor in college, he said, don't knock over the mic stand. He said, quit worrying about who the Antichrist is and start worrying about who the Christ is. All right? Be aware that there are world powers that are going to come together to struggle against God. Okay? Don't be surprised or amazed when it happens. Know that there will be a leader of them. But don't spend all of your time. Yes, God does. When we go on, we study in Daniel, I believe that God tells us that there are characteristics, even gives us foreshadowings of an Antichrist. But if you're spending all of your time worrying about who these people are and who the Antichrist is, and don't spend any time in your life trying to figure out who Jesus is to you, then you will go down with them. Because it says here, you can learn more about this empire, by the way, in Daniel 7, 9, 10, 11. And also Revelation 13, 1 and 17, 12. Because if you don't understand Daniel, you're not going to understand the Revelation. But it says, in those days of those kings, in verse 44, the God of the heavens will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Never. And this kingdom will not be left to another people. Nobody is going to succeed it. It will crush all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. You saw a stone break off from the mountain without a hand touching it, and it crushed the iron, bronze, fired clay, silver, and gold. And the great God has told the king what will happen in the future. The dream is certain and the interpretation is reliable. It's going to happen, in short. And it says that this kingdom of God will not be the work of men. You ever wonder why the Israelites, why the Jewish people missed Jesus, because they're looking for an earthly conqueror. They're looking to set up their own worldly empire. They're not looking for the kingdom of God. It becomes all about me and what's good for me and my worldly kingdom. And it will come unexpectedly. Guys, do you realize that we're going to study in Daniel 70 weeks that God told them when Jesus was coming. And it was unexpected to them. They were so focused on themselves and what they wanted, God gave them a timetable. And it was unexpected to them because they did not listen to the word of God. And he said, this kingdom will have no end. How can it have no end? It has to have a ruler that never dies. That's it. All of these other kingdoms that are based on mankind will come to an end. All the things that we plan that are our life's basis, they will all come to an end. And guys, I told you where you can go to read about the other kingdoms. If you want to read about this kingdom, read the whole Bible. The whole Bible's about this coming kingdom. In particular, one of my favorite verses about it, if you want to learn about this stone that's broken off, if you really want to hear about this stone, where it's coming from and where it's been and what it's doing, in Matthew chapter 16, verse 13 through 19. Sorry, Emily, I didn't give you this one. It says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they replied, some say John the Baptist, other Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But you, who do you guys say that I am? And Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus responded, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter. And he's not talking about Peter here. He says, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. On the confession that Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God, the Messiah. It is the stone that breaks empires. It is the stone that breaks the power of this world. It breaks the power of the world in nations. It breaks the power of the world in your life. It is the thing that lasts when everything else in your life crumbles. When it's blown by the wind, it is no more. When it's forgotten and nobody else remembers the works of your hands, on the rock that Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God. Just like they sang in the song this morning, on this solid rock I stand. This rock destroys the things of this world. The world is out to destroy you. It's out to destroy me. But the rock of Jesus Christ is where you find your hope and your salvation. And maybe you've been here today and you've been building kingdoms and you've been ruling your life. Guys, the Word of God is living and it's true. It is reliable. Trust in it and learn to trust in this rock. The only thing that survives when all else is gone. Rocks don't seem like glorious kingdoms, but this rock, it's going to be more precious than any other kingdom that ever comes, and its king will never die. Let's bow our heads.